Hello, so the article I've decided to discuss with you today is called UK Fusion Experiment Used in Hunt for Clean Energy. So this article is from BBC, or the British Broadcasting Corporation News. Their goal as a company is to, or at least according to their website, is to help people understand and engage with the world around them, as well as to support learning for people of all ages, and to reflect the United Kingdom and its culture and values to the world. So this article, right, the UK fusion experiment used in Hunt for Clean Energy, it was written by Paul Rincon or Rinson. I'm not sure how to pronounce that last name anyways. So he's a science and technology journalist for BBC and has reported across online, radio, and television platforms. He's spoken across multiple and a lot of places. He's experienced in a lot of subjects too. He's talked about astronomy, robotic space flight, human evolution, crustaceans, and as well as particle physics. Right, so he's a pretty credible source, I'd say, for what we're because he's experienced in journalism and you know wide range of topics in the fields of science. Anyways, so I also chose this article since it was on nuclear fusion, which is a topic that I've had a mild interest in for the past few years. I'm also interested in the development of clean energy technologies, as I enjoy living on a healthy Earth, as I live on the Earth myself, and fusion energy is a possible way in which we can keep the Earth healthy whilst not giving up the luxury we all have come to depend upon, electricity. Now let me tell you what I knew about the topic before reading the article. I knew the definition of nuclear fusion. I also knew that nuclear fusion usually happens at high temperatures, as those temperatures excite particles and cause them to move at extremely high speeds. This in turn causes the particles to be able to collide with each other, which would not usually happen due to the electrons being negatively charged, and then that would cause them to repel against each other. Another thing I knew was that the sun is powered through nuclear fusion, and this causes it to expand. One other thing that I knew was that fusion reactors have not been made that produce a net gain in terms of energy, as heat requirements were too large. There have been attempts to create cold fusion, but those have failed to meet those requirements as well. I probably know, I knew as well as know, a few more handfuls of information that were relevant, but those were the major points that I could remember. Going into this article, I expected to read about how scientists in the UK have actually managed to create a controlled fusion reaction, or somehow even made an entire power plant. I mean, I haven't kept myself up to date with all the science news, so I had no idea how long it would take for us to be able to use fusion energy. After reading it, while I was somewhat disappointed that fusion-based power plants were decades off into the future, I was also glad that we at least had a time estimate for how long it would take for us to harness nuclear fusion. One of the negative takeaways I had, though, was that making these reactors was expensive. I mean, one reactor was 55 million euros, or about $64 million. Anyway, those are some of the key takeaways I initially had whilst reading this article. After that first read, I read the article again, but this time trying to pick apart the details from it. Here's a list of some of the notes that I took. They're creating this reactor in Oxfordshire, England, at the Culham Centre. This innovation that the article is on is called MAST, which is an acronym for Mega Amp Spherical Tokamak Upgrade, which is an upgrade to the tokamak, a type of fusion reactor that involves the use of magnetic fields to fine plasma inside a vessel, allowing light elements to fuse and give off energy. The design of this reactor is different to other fusion reactors that have been made or are being made, as it changes the shape of the reactor from a torus to a more spherical shape by decreasing the hole of the torus as much as possible. The idea behind this is that since it's smaller, it will be cheaper and thus allow nuclear fusion to be more accessible. There were problems, though, with having to perform nuclear fusion in such a small container. One of which was that it required more energy to create. In fact, it required 10 times the heat of the surface of the sun. This can lead to the walls actually melting. What they made to combat that problem was to create a complex exhaust system called the Super X diverter. It was designed to channel plasma out of the machine at temperatures low enough for the materials to withstand, meaning that the components will receive far less damage. Their goal at Clem Center is to make the UK the world leader in fusion energy and capitalize on its potential. The main thesis of this article was that the Clem Center had created an innovation to fusion reactors that will have a large impact on the world, like some of its other innovations and projects. They developed this claim throughout the article by explaining what MAST is, and then continue on to mention the effects of one of Clem Center's previous projects, JET, or the Joint European Torus. Some of the evidence provided by the article about the mass fusion reactor is through actual pictures of the reactor, as well as a detailed explanation of how the reactor works and how it is different from other fusion reactors, along with using quotes from involved persons. The one major scientific concept discussed in this article is nuclear physics. Nuclear physics is mentioned in a certain amount of detail throughout the articles as the author explains the science behind the fusion reactor. An example of this is where the author describes how the tokamak fusion device uses magnetic fields to confine plasma inside a vessel. This article has left me asking several questions. Some of these questions are: will nuclear fusion be profitable enough to be considered a possible clean replacement for fossil fuels? And what are some of the other innovations in nuclear fusion technology? Another question I also have is nuclear fusion truly the most efficient way to create electricity, or is there a more efficient method we should focus our minds towards and create innovations to make that method even more efficient? Some of the things I believe the article did well in was that they were concise and made all of the science easy to understand for any viewer. Although this was helpful to many, it also made its explanation somewhat lackluster, as it lacked some information on the finer details about the reactor and its mechanisms. Overall, it was a decent article that gave me some interesting news about the level of progress we have in terms of how close we are to achieving nuclear fusion. I learned about the different innovations and programs currently ongoing that will affect our futures, as it shows us that nuclear fusion has a strong future and can be a part of many of our lives in a few decades' time.